to oppose fracking over the last few years. There's been numerous petitions, pamphlets developed, people have set up tables at the market, groups have formed, people have met with politicians, people have done a lot of contributions to email lists of good articles and that kind of thing. So this event is just another event along that long continuum of history, and I hope we end up being successful. People that you'll be hearing from today will be sharing kind of the high points of the submission that they intend to make to the Nova Scotia Review on Hydraulic Fracturing, that's also called the Wheeler Commission. So they'll be sharing sort of the key points of their individual submissions. So
there's two ways of looking at it. One, you can try and count up the leakage from all the steps in an actual well on the ground, the transmission, the production, and distribution. That's one way to look at it. The other way is to go up into the atmosphere and measure above a city how much methane there is up there. So those are the two ways that they're trying to estimate how much leakage is happening, and they're getting very different results in both ways. When they count it up on the sort of the ground level, they're getting between 1.5 if it's a new well with all sorts of capturing to avoid the leakage, to 17% for older wells. Wow. From above ground, they're getting anywhere from 2 to 4%. And the 17% estimate, everyone is saying, is way off. It's probably the most accurate. No one really knows. But of course, the industry is massively attacking those numbers.
I'm David Boyle, and I work with microorganisms. I'm a microbial physiologist. And microorganisms, by their name, they're very small. You can't really see them. So we're talking about bacteria and things that people usually don't concern themselves with very much. People used to think down in the underground, nothing's happening anyway. Nothing could be more wrong. Recent evidence is that there are microbes down there, bacteria down there. There are all sorts of microorganisms growing down in the soil, growing down 6 feet down, and amazingly, they go down miles into the subsurface, well into the zone where people are talking about fracking. The thing about these microbes is a lot of them are new. It's remarkable how little is known about these microbes. If you have one fracking site, the company can pump 200 Olympic swimming pools full of water down into the subsurface. When that water goes down, it has a microbial population associated with it. When it comes back up, after having sat down there in the fracked area, the population of microbes is entirely different than what went in. Interestingly, a lot of those microbes are adapted to growing at body temperature, and they may or may not be pathogenic. We know nothing about that.
I'm a certified health physicist, certified by the American Board of Health Physics. Recently retired as the Atlantic Region Radiation Specialist for Health Canada. It's also another related fact is that this part of Nova Scotia, the central part of Nova Scotia, has radon levels, radon being one of the types of atoms in both the uranium and the thorium decay chains, is present here in this area at about twice the national average. If there happens to be a nearby old well, there can be communication due to the fracking process between the new well and the old well. And the old well is much more likely to have well casing seal failure.
In summary, does fracking form a decisive part of the push toward the kind of more socially just, fair, and resilient future we so urgently need to see? No, Transition believes that there's many other alternatives which would support such a vision. I just wanted to finish by quoting George Monbiot. I know you'll really appreciate this. If anybody ever suggests to you that shale gas is a bridge to a low-carbon future, his quote is, "Believing a shale gas is a good bridging fuel to a low-carbon future is like believing that a double fudge chocolate cake is a bridge to a low-calorie diet."
Ever since this came up, I've tried to look at the health impacts. What does this mean for health? And initially, there was almost no one looking at that. And now it's actually become one of the hot topics about shale gas. It's probably going to be one of the decisive top issues in terms of decision making. There are, especially if we look at air emissions, there are toxic chemicals used and emitted at every stage of the shale gas operations, from drilling to fracking, compressor stations which concentrate the gas, diesel trucks, every stage has health risks, and that's been documented. Third point that's held in common in virtually every study is that there are especially risks to what are called vulnerable populations. Vulnerable populations would be children. Children don't process toxins the same way as adults do. Their sort of immune systems are less developed. We have to look at short, medium, and long-term impacts, is my argument. We have to look at the cumulative impacts, not just well by well, what's being set out, but people are breathing the air that's coming out of sometimes up to 30 wells within a mile of their houses. So you've got to look at, add those together.
I am a member of a religious congregation in the church, aka a nun. And we express our mission in the world as that of liberating education to a recognition, which is universal now, I think, at the scientific level of the interconnectedness, the profound interconnectedness of all life. For us, then, Earth Care rests on foundations uniting spirituality with scientific, ecological, and political insights into a dynamic and energizing relationship. And through a sense of wonder, we are invited to work for a just society, a fair economy, and a flourishing land. Because in the end, we always want to protect what we love.
Georgia and Malengis, we own about 400 or 500 acres up there where we do different programs. And we're not just a center for programs where we have a community from actually all over the world for some programs. Families who like to move here, who buy land for their children to actually live here and create good community that cares for each other. So they would be all very heavily impacted.
Second submission I'm working on is something that I call the evidence of missing evidence. And this is, I came up with that title because this is considered to be an evidence-based review. They've actually been pretty clear that they really don't want to hear about our passions. They want scientific evidence. And Alberta's always said we'd never had any problems. When this spill happened, there had to be an investigation, or there was an investigation, by a government body, which found that in fact there had been 21 similar incidents in the last year. And the reason no one knew about it is the companies weren't required to report them. So there's your missing evidence. How do we know where the problems are when there's no inspections going? 53 to 91% of those wells were not inspected. So we don't know. We don't know we don't know how many leaks there are. We don't know what's going on.
The salt truck stopped in front of me, and I was just about at the bank going into town behind it, and there was a delivery truck making deliveries to the drugstore. And the two vehicles couldn't pass because they were too wide. So we had to wait for the delivery man to make the deliveries to come back out to move his truck so that the salt truck could ease by it, and we went on. And I started thinking, what would happen in this area if we had the amount of traffic that is talked about for fracking? Overall, 38,400 to 172,800 tanker truck trips are possible over a well-pad life. We all know that along the North Shore, Highway 6 is the main highway. It goes from Amherst through Pugwash. It's the main street of Amherst. It's the main street of Pugwash. It's the main street of Wallace. It's the main street of Tatamagouche. It's the main street of River John. It's the main street of Tony River. There's no ring roads around our villages. There's no side roads. The side roads are much worse condition than the main road. Can you imagine this number of trucks? In Texas, there's a study by the Corpus Christi-based Naismith Engineering, and it quotes online, it quotes their lead engineer, David Underbrick Sr., as saying that a typical county road with a base material of 4 to 6 inches and possibly an asphalt seal coat would have a lifespan of 20 years. But, quote, all it takes is one pass of a 6 million pounds of drilling equipment to destroy a road like that, end of quote.